All hail our Rat King, Captain Brad Marchand was at his very best when it mattered most in a Game 3 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Thursday, April 25th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every single day, free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Grab your monocles and your top hats and check out the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, let's get into today's episode, my friends. A Game 3 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, spurred on by some heroics and gamesmanship on the part of Captain Brad Marchand. He scored 2 goals and rose in the ranks of Bruins playoff legends. Quick reminder first that you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren, lifelong Bruins fan, been covering this team for 20 years for various outlets, was a full-time hockey news writer for The Score, and now have been hosting this podcast for 5 years, celebrating a playoff win here this morning. What a game last night. The Bruins, I admitted, I at one point thought they looked a little cooked when they were down 1-0. Me of little faith. The Bruins were able to turn things around thanks to Brad Marchand, who had 2 goals and an assist, including the go-ahead goal at 11:53 of the third period, shortly after the Toronto Maple Leafs had tied things up. He took a pass from Heinen, who had won the puck behind the net, and just absolutely roofed it past Ilya Samsonov. This came after some shenanigans with Tyler Bertuzzi that were not called behind the play that allowed Trent Frederick to beat Samsonov with a pretty stoppable puck, let's be honest, to put the Bruins in a position of 1-1 at that time. We'll talk about those shenanigans, the officiating later, but Jim Montgomery said it best afterwards that before he was even coaching in the NHL, he was watching Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and what the Bruins were doing. They've always been an elite team. Marchand has always risen to big moments, and you look at his career points in the playoffs, just wow. And exactly, that's what comes to mind when you look at his stats. His empty net goal to seal it at 4-2 was the 55th career playoff goal. He's now tied with Cam Neely for most in Bruins history. Game-winning goal was the 12th of his playoff career, passing Neely for the most in Bruins history. I grew up watching the Cam Neely playoff teams, Adam Oates, Ray Bourque, others. That was my entry point into Bruins hockey. That was the team I loved as a kid. And I always wanted to see Cam Neely raise the cup. They never did it. Brad Marchand, when he came into the league, few would have thought he would be this good. He would be the captain. They're one step closer, still very far away, of course, from raising the cup. But you can't deny what he has achieved in the playoffs. And I talked yesterday about how there was some amount of pressure on him as the captain, as one of Boston's best players. Yes, he's a bit up there at this point in his career, not necessarily in his prime, but they still need him to be firing on all cylinders in order to win. And perhaps there's a bit of pressure on him as a captain to erase the failure from last year, to just not accept mediocrity, a one-and-done playoff appearance. And he really rose to the challenge last night, as did the puck going over Ilya Samsonov in that situation. Brad Marchand, just an unreal performance for him last night. And he said after the game, those are the things you look at down the road, look back on, and get excited about. Hopefully, there's plenty more in the tank. But to be in the company of a guy like Cam Neely, who's one of the most gifted goal scorers in the history of the franchise and the game, it is pretty special. Of course, Cam Neely is also in the Hall of Fame. Marchand definitely making a case for that. Jeremy Swayman was excellent in net for the Boston Bruins, a huge reason why they remained in the game until the point where they could pull away. He said, Marchand's our leader. He's a captain through and through. Doesn't take no for an answer. Leads by example. The pinnacle of what a captain should be. So lucky to have him in the room. We'll talk about the perspective on Marchand from the other team here in a moment, but can't say enough about his performance. There was some times earlier in the game where, I've been saying it all series long, just get the puck on Samsonov. He is vulnerable in net. And there was a couple opportunities where Marchand had the puck, could have just fired it on net, tried to pass it back or pass it over. When he had the puck on a stick, roofed it over Samsonov, and then fought hard to get the empty netter. Those are the kind of performances. That's what you want to see from your leader. Just leading by example, mixing it up, also producing, scoring. That's the most important thing. And Marchand is now, thanks to his 3-point game, he's now in a tie for the team lead in playoff point. No, he's actually ahead of Jake DeBrusk, who also scored last night. A huge power play goal that put the Bruins up 2-1. His third power play goal of the series. He's now got 5 points. And can't say enough also about how Jake DeBrusk is elevating his game. Those three guys, Swayman, Marchand, DeBrusk, were instrumental in this win. Again, Marchand now tied with Cam Neely at 55 goals. They're 2 wins away from advancing. Would love to see him break that record as early as the next game, which is not until Saturday. We got a couple of days in between here. But Brad Marchand elevating his game and getting under the skin of the opposition, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Jake DeBrusk saying of Marchand's performance, he's seen it for his whole career. He's a guy that scores in very different ways. Some of them are greasy, some of them are snipes. But Jake said, quote, I feel like the game where he plays the best is when there's a little bit of a cluster going on around him during the game or something, maybe before or after. That is when he gets in his little ball of hate mode, and usually good thing happens for the team. And we're going to discuss those extracurriculars and the discourse around the officiating here as the podcast continues. We've all been there as sports fans, even last night. The scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low. Not sure you or your team can pull out a win. But that's when you dig deep, lift up your head, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the Smash mobile hit game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards, to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra awards and climb the leaderboard. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. Get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So much of the discourse around last night's game was the officiating, and it was kind of a tale of two games in this one. There were a ton of missed calls both ways. Let's fully admit that. There was a blatant high stick on Charlie McAvoy from John Tavares in the first period. David Pastrnak got hit up high. There, of course, was the Charlie McAvoy tackle of Austin Matthews that, shouldn't have been allowed. But the reality is this was a game that came down to special teams and goaltending. On one hand, you had the Toronto Maple Leafs getting 5 power play opportunities, and the Bruins kept them off the board in each of those opportunities. Leafs went 0 for 5. The Bruins went 2 for 3. The second power play goal was the empty netter scored by Brad Marchand. The power play goal that was scored by Jake DeBrusk, of course, and then there was, that was it. The only other penalty they took was in the first period when Simon Benoit flipped the puck over the glass. Watching that game, you can't tell me that the Leafs committed 2 infractions that were worth calling a penalty on. That's just not possible. On the other hand, the Bruins were getting some unfortunate calls against Mason Lohrei with a couple minors, but they were able to keep Toronto at bay. And then one of the big turning points of the game was when Brad Marchand and Tyler Bertuzzi were going at it away from the play. Nothing was called, and Trent Frederick took advantage of that, scooped up the puck, and fired it past Ilya Samsonov. A shot that should have been stopped, let's be honest. And Marchand, between that and his offensive performance, he was a topic of conversation after the game from Sheldon Keefe, the Toronto Maple Leafs head coach, who offered some backhanded praise. He said, Marchand is a world-class player, both in ability and how he plays, the gamesmanship and everything. It's world-class. He's been in the league long enough. As you can see, he gets calls. It's unbelievable, actually, how it goes. You've got to play through that. You've got to play through that stuff. Now, I don't think Marchand drew any penalties last night. And there's no world in which you can argue that the referees side with Brad Marchand. All right? He does not typically get the benefit of the doubt. And perhaps if it was him and Austin Matthews mixing it up behind the play, that would be one thing where they would have called things and stopped it, although we saw McAvoy tackle Matthews and there was no call there. But the fact that he and Tyler Bertuzzi were getting into it and there was no stoppage of play, Tyler Bertuzzi is trying to do the same thing that Marchand's doing, just not as effectively. And Keefe went on to say, quote, I don't think there's another player in this series that gets away with taking out Tyler Bertuzzi's legs the way he does. There's not another player in this series that gets away with that. But he does. It's an art. He's elite at it. End quote. That's just not even true. Like, Marchand does not get the benefit of the doubt from the referees. Yes, he has developed a skill of towing the line. There's been many opportunities or many instances where he's gone way far over the line. There's been a lot of instances where it was a borderline call and he did not get the benefit of the doubt. But he certainly got under the skin of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's in their heads, and that's a good thing for the Boston Bruins. If he can take the Leafs off their game, and get Sheldon Keefe thinking about Brad Marchand instead of your power play going 0 for 5 or your goaltender letting in a soft one to tie the game. That's a benefit to the Boston Bruins. That is something they need to take advantage of. Jim Montgomery said there's a burning intensity in Marchand to win. He doesn't care about what just happened, good or bad. It's gone. He's on to what's next. And Matthew Nyes of the Maple Leafs said Marchand wants to get under their skin and influence the refs. I don't see him out there influencing the refs. They know him well enough that they know what he's about. The Leafs saying they need to get composed and not kind of get into that expletive. Just play hard and make him less effective. Marchand of that incident said he and Bertuzzi got tied up one shift. But outside of that, he didn't really think he was in the mix with anything. He's trying to play and play a good team game. At this time of year, it gets emotional. He's an emotional player. There's a lot of emotional players on the team. You need to be able to keep that intact. The Bruins have done a good job with it so far. They're playing hard between the whistles, not getting emotional. Bruins are not going over the line. So just have to continue that. And you can't say that the Bruins were getting favorable calls either when you have Max Domi out there bumping Jeremy Swayman during a TV timeout. I can see that Swayman went down kind of easily after getting bumped, but at the same time, there's like the unwritten rule that you don't touch the other team's goaltender in that situation, especially. There was no call on that. There were plenty of missed calls both ways. You could argue more Toronto's way, as they had the power play advantage 5-3. The third one coming very late when the Leafs had a 6-on-4 opportunity. John Tavares getting the call, holding on Charlie McAvoy. Yes, I admit the McAvoy tackle on Matthews was an egregious miss, but the fact that they didn't blow, you can't, it's a balance for the rest, right? Too, right? You certainly can't call everything that you see out there because in the playoffs, there's so much borderline stuff that it would just be a parade to the penalty box. There is a certain amount of letting this go, letting that go, calling it when it's clear penalty for the most part, and also some game management that comes into play. But at the end of the day, the Bruins went 2 for 3 in the power play. They kept the Leafs off the board on their extra man advantages. Jeremy Swayman was excellent in net. Ilya Samsonov let in some leaky ones. Brad Marchand did not influence this game other than scoring the game winner and adding an empty net goal. He did not influence the refs. He was not, campaign. If anything, it was like, you're missing these calls. Look at the power play disparity here. At the end of the day, the Bruins were able to kill off Toronto's opportunities, and Brad Marchand is in their heads, and that's a good thing here as our attention turns to Game 4. We'll talk about the goalie rotation and who might be the next player to step up huge here as the podcast continues. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't have to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. If you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matched their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count, and that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. The cost per application pricing is not available for everyone, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Check out Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. The Bruins and Leafs are off now until Saturday, so 2 full days, and Jim Montgomery was kind of lamenting the fact that Boston had to remain in Toronto longer than the Leafs were in Boston. Jim, I'm like an hour away. House is open. Come over, grab a beer. We can watch some NHL playoff action tonight. If you want to check that out, anybody welcome to come as well. It's a perfect opportunity. Back in 2011, they pieced out from Montreal to Lake Placid. Take the boys, head out down to the falls or go up to Muskoka and clear their heads ahead of game 4. Now, Marchand, like I said, stepped up huge. The next guy I'm looking to have a huge game is David Pastrnak. And let's not pretend he's been bad. He's been very good so far. He's got 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points in 3 games. He only had 1 shot in game 3, however. Would love to see him have the kind of game that Brad Marchand just had, or the kind of game that Austin Matthews had in game 2. If the Bruins want to win game 4 and head back to Boston with a 3-1 series lead, Pastrnak needs to have his biggest game of the series so far. He is 3rd on the team with 3 points, tied with Charlie McAvoy, who's got 3 assists, but it's been Marchand, DeBrusk, who have been carrying the load offensively so far. Marchand with 12 shots on goal. Brandon Carlo has more shots on goal than David Pastrnak so far in this series. Carlo's got 8. Pastrnak only with 7. So we need that shot total to rise. And again, Ilya Samsonov is proven to be vulnerable. Perhaps they go to Joseph Woll for game 4. But Pastrnak especially, he did have 1 very, very good opportunity that did not count as a shot. That was blocked by Joel Edmondson. And that, was a goal-saving block. But still, 7 shots through 3 games is too low for David Pastrnak, especially with Ilya Samsonov in net. When it comes to the goalie rotation, I'm fine with putting a pin on that for now. Keep rolling with Jeremy Swayman here. He seems to have Toronto's number, and that's not to say Linus Ullmark was not good in game 2. He was very, very good and gave the Bruins a chance to win. But I think the goalie rotation at this point should be not every game in and out, but it should be if Swayman falters, you have no hesitation going to Linus Ullmark immediately. And Jeremy Swayman said he wants to play anytime I can get a chance to play. He said, I'm going to do whatever I can to help this team win, whether it's back-to-back or every other game. He's really grateful every time he gets a chance, and that's all he's worried about. He's never expected anything, wanting to earn it. That's all he cares about. But he was pretty clear about saying he wants to keep playing. He does not want or need rest. He's wanting to get back out there right away. He's got a .955 save percentage so far in the postseason in those 2 games. Just keep going with him because the Leafs have perhaps more confidence going against Linus Ullmark because they know that they've beaten him in this series. But, go to Ullmark if Swayman falters. Knock on wood, if they make it to the next round, you can revisit the rotation. But for right now, Swayman is the guy. There were some changes yesterday in the lineup. I thought James Van Riemsdyk, he had 2 very, very good opportunities on a breakaway. Just couldn't sneak it back Samsonov, and then he hit the post. I liked him in there over Jacob Lauko. Lauko's a big energy guy, but Van Riemsdyk has more of a nose for the net. On defense, Andrew Peeke was out. Parker Wotherspoon was in, as was Mason Lohrei. Lohrei played very well. He did have those 2 penalties. Parker Wotherspoon was a beast out there. There was some concern early in the game after he took a block shot, and slow to get up, but he stayed out there and, certainly warranted more of a look. We'll see if they put Matt Grzelcyk back in the lineup for Mason Lohrei. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Or if Derek Forbort is ready to go for game 4. But Witherspoon, I'd like to stay in there. He just had something special in his veins last night. The big story, of course, was Captain Brad's huge night. 2 goals, getting under the skin. He had an assist, climbing the ranks of Boston greats. And Jeremy Swayman doing everything to earn a second straight start in game 4. 2 days now between games. We'll be back tomorrow to preview game 4. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Again, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. No better time to subscribe and to become an everyday listener. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.